If this is an issue that I never have to talk about again the rest of my life, then I will have talked about it far, far too many times. Trans women in women's sports. Holy shit. I have never been so fed up with a goddamn topic in my life. Jesus Christ. Is this the end of women's sports? It's a fundraiser, too. $36,000 going towards fighting censorship. The absolute unadulterated audacity of collecting fundraise money from your probably not doing great economically followers when you are funded by billionaires. What absolute shamelessness, people. Absolute shamelessness. Wait, is this money going to prageru? Yeah, the money isn't even going towards like anything having to do with trans women in sports. It's just about helping prageru fight censorship. Anyway, let's do it. All right, let's get it. Right off the bat, we have some incredibly low IQ argument from intuition, okay? I'm pretty sure that whether we're talking men's or women's sports, I can find plenty of track and field relays, plenty of sprints, plenty of weightlifting competitions, plenty of volleyball jousts where one person is larger, stronger, and faster than the others. This is a non-argument. Let's go. Selena Soul, hit me.
I've been training to be a championship sprinter since I was 8 years old.
This one! We watched a documentary about this girl, I think. Remember? Wait, isn't she the one? That's not, yeah. Isn't this the one who did that documentary? That awful, awful documentary where she was bitching and moaning that transgender women stole her dreams? Yeah, 3 Connecticut high school girls are suing over a policy that allows trans athletes to compete in girls' sports. This girl is like high schooler. She's at like the forefront. Yeah, she's like a sore loser. Wait, didn't she didn't even go in second place, did she? Yeah, she was like in 4th or something like that. The transgender woman lost the following competition. Yeah, damn, no shit. Hold on, wait, hold on, wait. Let me see if I can find. Internet creeped out by transphobic activists unsettling Tucker Carlson appearance. Oh, this is a Daily Dot article. Okay, hold on. Oh.
Thank you for having me on again, Tucker. There are great biological differences between a man's woman and a female's body, and that's why sports have always been segregated.
This just seems to be her being nervous while on national television. She's like young. I can't really blame that. Wait, hold on. Can we get race? Can we get the stats on that? Selena Soul was forced to compete against boys in high school track. 16-year-old Selena Soul speaks up. Wait, this was in 2019. Is she only 17 right now? Jesus Christ. Okay. Oof. I have to wonder, how much of Selena Soul's advocacy here do you think is hers? And how much of it do you think is like parents or other people in her life? You know what I mean? Because I feel like really, really often in situations like this, it's parents like some kind of helicopter mom. Sweetie, you should have won that race if only it weren't for the trans Satanists. And then like, you know, you get pushed down the road. Would you say the same thing about Greta though? Well, I don't think that Greta's engagement is like 100% spite-based, but like, yeah, there's definitely like a possibility that Greta's involvement in climate change activism has a lot to do with the influences of her parents, sure. Difference is, I'm okay with people advocating to fight climate change. I'm not okay with people running around on Tucker Carlson saying that trans women are gigantic, meaty muscle demons, you know? 17-year-olds are old enough to be transphobic, though? Yeah, but usually with young people, there's some kind of overlying element. That doesn't speak to any of the arguments here. It's just a feeling that I get. Greta actually convinced her mom to give up flying? Oh, that's nice. I wish somebody could... I fucking hate flying. Convince me. All right, go to it. Let's go.
With the help of my parents, my coaches, and my teammates, I did it.
Wait. Oh, wait, we're talking about running here. Sorry. I was primed from the discussion on getting involved. Okay. Okay.
Sophomore year of high school, in 2018, I was one of the top 5 female high school sprinters in Connecticut.
Cool.
But then, one day, I wasn't. At
Damn.
the state championships that year, 2 people passed me, passed all of us girls, literally. They finished first and second in our races, dominating the field. Were they more motivated? Did they train harder? I don't think so.
Wait, how could you possibly know that? Wait. Hold on. How can you possibly offhandedly dismiss that? Okay, Jesus Christ. Did they train harder? Were they more competent? Were they more athletically effective? Nah, probably not.
But they did have an edge, a big one we couldn't match. They were biological boys who said they were transgender girls.
So, all right, we're getting into it now. Okay, listen the fuck up, people. Are you ready for it? Let's get ready for it, okay? As long as criticisms of trans women's participations in sports overlaps with transphobia, you will never be taken seriously. Flat out, period. If you want to pretend you have legit arguments on this subject, you have some sort of sincere medical complaint about this, and we can hear those complaints, that's fine. But as long as you're overlapping that shit with, these boys said they were women, then you have nothing. You have zilch. Because let's be real here, okay? I need to be clear about this. Nobody gives a fuck. Nobody gives a fuck about women's sports. That's not fair. That's not good, but it's true. And the people who care about them the least are conservatives. I remember that for decades, women's sports were the butt of conservative jokes. All the time. All the time. Like, why would you watch the WNBA, you know? What, you're not getting enough ass at home? You want to see it jiggle in their fucking basketball shorts? Like, that was the joke. That was the line. Women's sports have always been, particularly in the conservative discourse, a vessel for the sexualization of women and very little else. Paying attention to them for athleticism, not something that people pay attention to. So the fact that conservatives all of a sudden are just sanctimoniously concerned with the validity and with the fairness of trans women's sports, it's absolute bullshit. It's complete, absolute, and utter bullshit. Now, I'm not saying that this girl who's talking right now, Jesus. I'm not saying this girl right here doesn't care about women's sports. She's a female athlete. I imagine she does care about women's sports quite a bit. But this is a prageru video. And the advocacy against trans women in women's sports does not begin and end with this one 17-year-old sprinter. It begins and ends with a massive conservative... Oh my God, I'm sorry. I didn't have food this morning. That's going to affect the quality of this segment. It begins and ends with a conservative propaganda machine that is clearly disingenuous in the way that they approach this issue. Do any of you disagree with that? When you're making an argument about a complex social issue, you need to make it clear that your argument stems from a factual and thorough understanding of the issues at hand and not from bias. If you introduce bias, why the fuck should anyone listen to you if you didn't care enough about the issue to not excise that component of your argument? Imagine if somebody was talking about inner city crime and the way they talked about it, like they were invoking like race and IQ arguments, for example. If a person is trying to make a sociological prescription about imprisonment or the criminal justice system or about judicial bias or about policing, and they start talking about IQ, do you think that person is approaching this conversation in an effective or in an honest way? Absolutely not. But there are legitimate arguments that you can make. You know what? In fact, I'm going to take a stand right here, okay? There are elements of all cultures and subcultures that are problematic in some way or another. If you're under the impression that there's an issue with black culture, for example, if you think there's something about black culture you take an issue with, okay? I think there are arguments there that can be heard. I think there are issues with what we would colloquially consider to be American white culture. But if you're overlapping those arguments with race and IQ arguments, you're not really making a culture argument. You're making an argument generally against black people, and you're kind of throwing it all against the wall and seeing what sticks. I know that in spite of all you concerned trolls in chat, I understand that you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're mixing bad faith and good faith arguments, there's no reason to take the good faith one seriously. Bosh, where do you actually stand on IQ? Low IQ argument a lot, but you actually believe in IQ stuff? I mean, IQ is a thing that exists. IQ as a system seems to reliably determine humans' abilities to do certain things. I don't think it's the be-all, end-all of intelligence. If I say a person has a low IQ argument, I'm just insulting them. You probably shouldn't look too much into it.
Do you think that's fair? Males competing against females?
See, this is exactly what I mean. This isn't the argument that's being made right here. Males against females isn't the argument that's being made. There are objective physiological differences between transgender women and cisgender men. That's not well, assuming you've transitioned, obviously. That's not a matter of opinion. That's a matter of fact. So if you reduce the argument to this level, you're clearly not actually engaging with the, what would you call it, the literature?
Before you make up your mind, let me tell you a bit about what it took for me to become a top female sprinter.
Damn, this has nothing to do with the argument.
Training with my team every day after school for at least 2 hours, working to shave fractions of a second off of my time in the 100 and 200 meter dash.
Wouldn't the trans women have also done this?
It meant not hanging out after school or going out with friends on the weekends. It meant getting up early every Saturday morning and competing all day at a meet. It meant not indulging in any of the things that might cost me my dream.
Where is the trans women who stepped onto the field? They were actually computer science, advocates. We're talking a solid like 260 pounds. Haven't run a day in their life, and they just went on there. They just busted the record. I don't know what the argument here is being made. Obviously, like the trans women also trained. What this is right here is an entitlement issue. That's what this is. This is a millennial entitlement issue, or I guess Zoomer entitlement issue. What do you want, a participation trophy? What, because you worked hard, you think you win by default?
And here's the thing about the 2 biological males that took the top 2 girls' medals in the state of Connecticut. Their times were not even good enough to qualify them to compete in the state championships on the boys' team. Let me say that again in case you missed it. Their times were not good enough to qualify them for the boys' state championships.
Well, that's a good thing they weren't competing against the boys, right? Oh, okay. Wait, if their times weren't good enough to qualify for the boys' state championships, then yours sure as shit wasn't. Wait, what does that have to do with anything? What? Isn't this actually a counter argument? Wait, if they ended up outperforming the boys' run as well, wouldn't that be more of an argument for your case, that they're that far in a different league than you? Saying that they weren't able to qualify for the boys' run kind of supports my argument, doesn't it?
But 2 years in a row, they won first and second place competing against the girls. All in all, these 2 biological males won 15 women's state championship titles.
Damn.
Some in the media have accused me of being a sore loser. They tell me to run harder. But the biological changes that males go through during puberty are so significant, they gain an insurmountable advantage in strength and in speed. That's why boys always competed against boys and girls against girls.
So this is factually incorrect in a number of ways, but we're going to get to the science of this in just a bit.
U.S. runner Allison Felix is an inspiration to me. She's the fastest female sprinter in the world.
Cool.
Her lifetime best for the 400 meters is 49.26 seconds.
Pretty cool.
But based on 2018 data, nearly 300 high school boys in the U.S. alone could beat that record. What we are talking about then is not just boys taking women's trophies, though they are. And we aren't talking about biological boys taking women's athletic scholarships,
biological boys,
though they'll do that too.
Hey, here's a question. If the transphobe line is that trans women are men, why do they have to keep saying biological males? Why don't they just say men? It's interesting. They keep jumping back and forth between calling trans women men and calling them biological males. But nobody would ever call a cis man a biological male. They're putting a lot of emphasis on 2 separate sets of terminology that indicate a weird doublethink when it comes to the extent to which they're willing to validate these people's identities.
Biological boys are allowed to compete against girls in sports like track, where the differences in performance are so great. We are talking about girls getting shut out, never getting the chance to win or even compete at all. When two
Never getting the chance to win or even compete at all? What the fuck are you I'm sorry, is this like some unseen fucking genocide going on in high school track that I'm not noticing here? Or like every single high school across the country? Like, because the way this prageru video makes you want to believe it, it's that you have all of these like these cis girls like crying in the locker room while outside on the actual track and field there are like 8 fucking 10-foot tall muscular trans women like flexing, like veins bulging everywhere, getting ready for the relay, you know? Like, I'm pretty sure, listen, we're gonna get to this in a second, okay? We'll get to the science in a second. Let's finish the dumb shit.
Two biological boys took the first and second place spots against me in the 2019 Indoor State Championship. I lost the opportunity to participate at the New England Championships.
Damn, that sucks.
I lost the chance to be scouted by top coaches.
Okay, hold on. These emotional, there's a reason why they're looking for a 17-year-old girl to be the forefront of this argument and not like a biologist, okay? The reason for that is because they're relying on emotional appeals. None of this has anything to do with the complex question, the socio-biological question of trans women's participation in sports, okay? It's like look at this fucking baby arguments. I couldn't eat pizza. I had to run 2 hours every day. Now I'll never be scouted. Like, dude, I'm sorry. It's fucking sports, okay? There are tons of people who feel exactly like you and all they did was compete against cis women, okay? The idea that you're experiencing some kind of unique oppression because you competed against trans women is completely fucking false, all right? This victim culture. Chill.
Possibly even to win scholarships. Right now, biological boys are being allowed to set records on the girls' team, deleting girls' records, erasing the achievements of actual girls, and setting a standard probably no girl can meet.
This is just not happening. If this was happening, then she'd be able to list actual examples of this happening. First of all, you don't delete people's previous records by beating them. That's not how that works. They're still there and known for the time period during which they stood. No record stands forever. Additionally, the way this works makes it seem as though like every record across the country for women's track is being broken by trans women, which is, again, not the case. Trans women have been able to participate in Olympic sports for quite a while, actually. And for some reason, interestingly enough, trans women are not dominating women's athletic participation at an Olympic level, which really makes you wonder if there might be some reason why, in spite of trans women allegedly having some significant physiological benefits over cis women when it comes to athletics, they aren't dominating the Olympics. But we'll get to that in a second.
No matter how much she trains or how hard she tries. The reason that we have girls' sports in the first place is to give female athletes with talent, hard work, and dedication an equal opportunity to shine and be recognized.
I think we have girls' sports because girls like playing sports. What? Hey, wait. Is she saying this is the reason why we separate sports by sex? But the way she phrased this really made it seem like this was a charity case, you know? Like, the reason why we invented girls' sports was so that they could feel like they were real special people too, you know? Like, Vosh, she didn't lose her opportunities because of them. This girl came in 8th place in the race she's talking about, and the 5 girls who beat her, you mean 5 cis girls, haven't complained about trans women existing. Can I get evidence of that she actually came in 8th in that race and therefore would have been fucked no matter what? That the existence of trans women have literally nothing to do with Dude, no way! Real? Selena Soul, 5 fast facts you need to know. She finished in 8th? Bitch, you wouldn't have made, like, regional anyway. You finished 8th? Soul told the outlet she was not able to qualify for the 55-meter event in the New England Regionals because of the transgender runners. The 2 athletes been barred from the race. Soul said she would have finished 6th and qualified for the regional. Oh, hold on. So finishing in 6th place would have qualified her for the regional? Dude, come on. Mega cope, dude. 6th place? That's what you're fighting over right now? Sorry you would have fucking snaked in by the skin of your teeth. Jesus Christ. Hey guys, here's a hot question. Hey guys, really interesting question for you. Maybe you can figure out if there would have been some bias here. What do you think Selena Soul would have done if the top 5 runners had been cis women, and then 6th and 7th place had been trans women, and then 8th place had been her? Even though in that race, the trans women were outperformed by 5 cis women, do you think she would have blamed them anyway? Even though in that case, same complaint. It would have been the same fucking complaint. Absolutely, they still would have. Even if in that race, trans women had underperformed relative to the cis women, she still would have complained. She would have said, they were still cheating. They came in these advantages. Which isn't great, you know. What place did the trans people make? I think they made 1st and 2nd place. But according to somebody in chat, they actually did not. They didn't like win in the regionals anyway. So I don't know if they even like went ahead to go dominate running or whatever. You know. Oh. Apparently, the group behind this lawsuit that they're filing against trans women in sports or whatever, apparently this group is considered a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Jesus. The ADF, the Alliance Defending Freedom, founded by some 30 leaders of the Christian right, legal advocacy and training group that has supported the recriminalization of homosexuality in the U.S. and criminalization abroad, has defended state-sanctioned sterilization of trans people abroad, has linked homosexuality to pedophilia, and claims that a homosexual agenda will destroy Christianity and society. So, this is what I mean when I say that these arguments with regards to trans women in sports have literally nothing to do with science. This whole push to delegitimize trans women in sports because of their alleged superior athletic performance is and always has been about hating trans people and has literally nothing to do with women's sports. Conservatives don't give a fuck about women's sports. Unironically, if women's sports were just abolished, like conceptually, the next day, not a single conservative would shed a tear over it. They don't fucking care. They don't give a shit about women. They don't care about any of this bullshit, okay? What they care about is hating trans people. And because trans women's participation in women's sports seems like an issue where you could make some reasonable criticisms, they're going to take that and they're going to fucking run with it. They've done this exact same thing for every single minority in history. This is playbook 101 shit. Like, for example, the idea that same-sex couples can't raise a child because children are naturally meant to be raised by a man and a woman. That's how it's been for all of human history. Don't look at a history book. That's definitely true. That right there. Now, that sounds like a good faith concern for children, even though there's no scientific backing to it. In reality, what is it? It is and always has been an excuse for homophobia. 100%. They did the same thing with the civil rights movements, too. They still do it today. I'm not racist. I just think there are, natural, cultural, and civil differences between black and white people. And maybe if society recognized those distinctions, then maybe we wouldn't have so many problems. So maybe you could argue, maybe there's an argument. I wouldn't agree with it, but maybe there's an argument to be made here. But that's not the argument they're trying to make. They're implying essentialism or essential hatred. They did the same thing with slaves way back in the day. How many white slave owners do you think convinced themselves that they were doing the world a service by acting as patrons for the interests of slaves, uneducated, illiterate slaves who would starve out on the street were it not for them? I'd be willing to bet that was probably the belief held by the majority of them. And you have these people, they say, I know that slavery seems like a bad institution, but actually, if you look at it, it's almost like we're doing charity. I'm just taking care of them. They're all like my little baby sons and daughters. But they hated the black people. Yeah, they still believe that to some extent. Never, ever, ever dignify these bad faith, pseudoscientific, pseudo-sociological arguments when all people are doing is looking for an excuse to assign essentialist hatred. Okay? Do we still have time in the prageru video? Nah, I'm bored. I'm bored of this prageru video. Let's talk about the science of transgender women's participation in sports, okay? So, when you are very, very, very young, okay? I'm talking like 3 or 4 years old, boys and girls, males and females, whatever, are basically the same. They're the same, basically, whatever. They're like little dumb dumb, fat morons. They want to lick electric sockets and stick forks in toasters. They're just stupid, okay? The real, what we call sexual dimorphism, which is a biological term for physiological differences between the sexes, the real sexual dimorphism takes place around puberty. Though there's some ramping up beforehand, but once you get like 9, 10, 11, 12, the real kicker begins, and that's when your body releases hormones, and depending on your chromosomes and a bunch of other really complicated shit that we do not need to get into, depending on your pre-existing physiological conditions, those hormones have different effects on people, okay? So the effects that they have in your body are going to be largely determined by the receptors within your body, which are determined in large part with you at birth, and the hormones that are being expelled like a fucking torrent from your thyroid and the other places where your hormones come from. And the thing we're really looking at with regards to trans women are your androgen receptors, how androgen sensitive you are. Essentially, assigned male at birth people, like a me, basically think of it this way, okay? I'm gonna dumb it down real simple, okay? Because I mean the specifics of it, the technicalities are beyond my understanding. I mean, it's biology, but the gist of it is that think of it this way, okay? You're like a little assigned male at birth boy, like 8 years old me. I hit puberty early, okay? And then all of a sudden, kaboom! Puberty happens. Fucking kabam! Hits you in the back of the head, okay? And what you have all over your body, okay? All right? What you have all over your body, thank you, are a bunch of little cellular versions of husky Greek men with hairy shoulders ready to lift some weights, okay? All right? And then puberty happens. Your thyroid starts pumping out dumbbells, okay? Flinging those dumbbells all over your body, okay? And all the tiny Greek men inside of your body start... They start fucking hulking out, okay? They start fucking going hard. And because I have high androgen sensitivity, that dose of hormones ends up having a significant effect on a bunch of characteristics that I have, which relate to my athletic performance, okay? So we're talking about we're talking about raw strength. We're talking about muscle recovery time. We're talking about bone density. We're talking about physical proportioning, like the width of my shoulders. We're talking about a whole bunch of shit really useful for being an athlete, you know? A lot of stuff. Yeah, we're not talking boneless, okay? We're talking bone full, okay? A lot of stuff coming out there. Now, that's me. That's what puberty did to me. Also made me hairy and shit, you know? Whatever. But that ain't the case for everyone. Cis women, you know, they don't got hairy-shouldered Greek men inside of their blood. You know, they got yoga moms. I don't know. They've got it's not the same. It's not got they don't got that. So when they get their puberty blast, you know, it doesn't have the same long-term effect on their physiological development. Now, everything that I'm describing right now is a product of puberty, okay? So the real question is, and this is the real question, to what extent can physical transition for a trans woman alleviate the benefits they received athletically from experiencing puberty as a man, male puberty? That's the real question, okay? So the first things first, we have to recognize that if we're just looking at cis women and cis men, there is a significant difference in athletic and physical ability between the two groups. There are some people who are dishonest or misinformed, and they pretend that cis women and cis men are like kind of comparable in the same ballpark. Unfortunately, anyone who has ever walked outside and had any interaction whatsoever with people in a physical sense, you just know that's not true, okay? Cis men have an overwhelming physical advantage in most ways over cis women untrained. And if you both train, those advantages scale proportionally. So how much does transitioning change that? Well, If you go on HRT, if you take estrogen for long enough, specifically for about 2 years, that seems to significantly decrease the amount of, well, obviously the amount of testosterone in your body, but it also weakens your muscles, weakens your bones. It makes you less athletically superior to the average cis woman. Because the goal should be to ensure that transgender women are in the same expected range of outcomes as cisgender women. It is true that sports are inherently unfair because they rely on certain genetic advantages no matter what, but not just with women or men or trans or cis, but in general, you know? I promise you, the average swimmer does not have the genetics that Michael Phelps has, okay? That's not just a training thing. Fucker's got gills, okay? That was his mom fucking a fish, okay? That wasn't... Something was going on back there. So there's always a degree of unfairness here, but you want trans women to be in the same basic range of performance, because if they go way beyond that range of performance, then you get butt-mad 17-year-olds bitching that they made 8th place instead of 6th place in a state championship. We don't want that, do we? Because then they get funded by hate groups, and we have to listen to them for the next 20 years as they become a Fox News commentator. HRT does seem to impose those effects to a pretty significant extent. From what I have seen, there are some advantages athletically that trans women have that 2 years of feminizing hormones do not always address. There are ways in which that does not fully course correct in all people, especially if you transition later in life. Now, Connecticut, the state that she competed in, has no restrictions whatsoever on trans women's participation in women's sports. That is to say, you don't even need to transition. Not to come off saying like callous or anything here, but in some respects, there are some legitimate concerns there. Because I understand you're pogging right now, but if you train for 16 years of your life as a cis male before recognizing your identity and socially transitioning to a woman, you are going to have an extraordinary set of physical advantages over the people that you compete against. Which is why I generally advocate for requiring some necessary time period during which you need to be engaged in medical transition. The real solution to the sexual dimorphism we see here is to prevent trans women from ever having gone through male puberty. And the way you do that is with hormone blockers, which I've talked about plenty of times. With hormone blockers, if properly administered with medical supervision and all, it's all done, of course, appropriately, as it should be, because it is a very stringent and complicated process. You go through all of that, and you prevent a trans woman from ever experiencing a male puberty. They just don't do it. They never get the Greek men. They never get the Greek men with the hairy shoulders. Never happens. And as an additional point, you know, depending on how long you take those puberty blockers, there are some lingering bone density consequences that might end up overcompensating. You know, there's research on that. Hold on. Is it not transphobic to say trans women must take hormone blockers to participate in sports, therefore delegitimizing them? Well, no, because trans women don't have to take hormone blockers to participate in sports. I'm saying that trans women should probably have some pre-existing range of time during which they need to have been engaging in medical transition to participate in women's sports. It's just an unfortunate, natural unfairness of the world. There's no, real, true, good answer to it. Obviously, in an ideal world, literally anybody would be able to just go out there and do sports, flat off the bat. And the problem that I have with these trans women and women's sports issues is that there is nuance behind all of it. But none of that nuance actually gets discussed in conservative hit pieces like these. These are meant to foment hate and division, not some, actual understanding of the issue. Vosh, forgive my ignorance, but is there a risk of people thinking they're transitioning, then realizing they're not? Well, I mean, yeah, sure, there are people who detransition, though, in spite of what conservative media will tell you, the vast majority of people who detransition do so because A, they can't afford a transition anymore, B, there's a medical complication that's preventing them from doing what they want to do, which is continuing to transition, or C, because they want to shoot virile loads of sperm so that they can freeze it and later have a biological child, and they need to stop taking hormones for a bit to make sure that they are appropriately fertile. Does that all make sense? But Vosh, you're saying her concerns are totally valid since the place she competed doesn't have any requirements for hormonal transition? Well, that's the tragedy, isn't it? There are legitimate questions and conversations that can be had about this. But here's the fact of the matter, okay? This is not a big deal, all right? The way conservatives talk about it make it sound like Western civilization is crumbling, excuse me, under the weight of trans women participating in sports, which is fucking ridiculous, okay? This is a fairly niche social and civil rights issue that is fairly nuanced and should be treated with the nuance that it deserves. That's my position on the issue. When I talk about trans women's participation in women's sports, my goal first and foremost is not to engage in the complex, the complex, social and biological arguments around their participation. Usually I'm more interested in getting the conservative to admit they don't give a fuck about women's sports, okay? That's usually my preference. Because they're not approaching this in good faith. Imagine, for example, if a conservative wanted to talk to you about black culture, you know? There are a lot of nuanced arguments there, and that's not just me. There are plenty of black civil rights advocates who have complained or had concerns about... Stop pepeing. Who have had concerns about certain elements of popular culture and the way it relates to, like, capitalism and the dominant media narrative that people reinforce. Those are legitimate conversations to be had. But do you think that's a conversation that I'm legitimately going to try to have with, like, with like, a fucking conservative? What if we get rid of gender categories for sports, but control for hormone levels that we know affect performance? Nah, that leads to a really, really, really bad outcome. There are actually cisgender women who have been blocked from participating in Olympic sports because the Olympics does have a testosterone threshold to determine, like, sexual participation. What was the name of that woman? She was like a marvelous athlete, but she wasn't allowed to participate, even though she was a cisgender woman, because she had a high test level. Caster Semenya. That's right. Phenomenal athlete. Yeah, to use ELO rankings, exactly. Do it based on performance then? This is a whole separate conversation. There are going to be significant problems and unfairnesses with how you rank sports, whether you do it by sex, or whether you do it by gender, or whether you do it by weight, or whether you do it by weight to strength ratio, or whether you do it by performance. Like, there's always going to be an issue. There's no easy solution to any of this. Also, you have to recognize that unless you do it by gender, like, women are almost never going to get top spot in anything above, like, the absolute lowest weight classes. Wouldn't weight work? Sure, but then the only categories in, like, sports that women would ever win would be, like, 100-pound categories, you know? Which probably isn't going to happen. Pound per... Isn't that fine? Well, sure, you know, it depends on how much you think women like getting gold medals. I don't know. I'm a trans woman athlete. Can I come on and talk about this? No, I appreciate it, but I am no anecdotal Reno. If there's a biologist or some sort of medical or athletic doctor that I could bring on at some point, I'd be happy to have that convo, but you never know how this is going to go. Vosh, pro soccer teams have competed against 15-year-old boys and lost greatly even. Well, that thing you're referring to there was like the one highly publicized incident. But it is true that, yeah, even like the absolute top tier female athletes will usually get outperformed by mid-tier male athletes. You know? Why is a cis woman with naturally high testosterone being left out worse than a trans woman with the same advantage being left out? Well, the advantages aren't necessarily identical. The argument would be not individual, but categorical. That if you don't have any requirement for trans women to transition beforehand, then you could have like the conservative nightmare taking place, where you have like male bodybuilders training for 20 years and then like transitioning, and 6 months later they're breaking every woman's weightlifting record in history, you know? Which, yeah, it's a complicated subject. It's a complicated subject. It's a complicated subject. Stop. End segment. Tempest, stop. Cut it. Stop. Please stop.